In this video, I wanted to go over a few examples of how to deal with like polishing your scene, finishing touches, if you will, things that I really wouldn't focus on until you've got like a lot of the overall structure in place. And the issue here also is like these polish elements, you can really sink a ton of time into them and really perfect everything about your the presentation of your project. So it's dangerous to start on them too early, because if you do it, you risk sinking a ton of time into like getting really good lighting, but then you actually have no time or motivation left to actually finish your interactive elements of your scene. So normally you want to build out the playable structure first and then move on to these polish elements. Now, sometimes things like lighting can impact how playable your experience is. Like, for instance, if the scene is totally dark, you can't really play it, so you might have to address that first. So let's take a quick look at lighting. This is like way too big of a topic to really go into in this video, but I like since we're using these asset packs, I think it's easiest to like start with their demo scene and then like save a copy of that scene in your scenes folder, and then you'll kind of benefit from whatever lighting they had set up without erasing their original demo in case you need to revisit it later. And hopefully that'll get you pretty far, but you may need to fix something or customize something, and if that's the case, it's going to be helpful to know about this window rendering, and then these two settings here are really important for lighting. So I'm going to actually go ahead and open both of them, and I guess I could like dock them just since we're going to take a look at them both. I'll just put it up in this top spot here that's a little bigger, and the other one was the Lighting Explorer. So let's see, maybe this one, well, yeah, that's fine too. All right, so first thing, when I'm in the lighting tab here, I want to know if I have a skybox. If you're doing an outdoor scene, your skybox is going to give you like a ton of value. It just makes everything look way better than whatever you get out of the box with the default skybox Unity gives you. If you go to the asset store, you can find a bunch of free skyboxes to try out. And the thing is, the skybox is actually a light source, so it does kind of affect how your scene looks. If I found that my scene was just kind of overall too dark, I could like adjust this, and the sky would kind of generate more light. You can see it especially on this character, but notice that like you can't really see it changing the environment so much. And the reason is my scene is set up to use something called baked lighting, which I guess we should try to explain now. There's two types of lighting, generally speaking. You have baked lighting, which is meant to save performance. It's meant to help your scene run on slower computers with faster frame rates by pre-computing the lighting information and baking it into the textures that you see. And that's how this scene that I'm using is set up. If I click, to figure out what it's doing, if you scroll down to where it says real-time lighting, you can see if it has mixed lighting or baked lighting checked. And in this case, I have baked global illumination checked, which means it's using baked lighting, which means if I were to press this generate lighting button, it would like compute how the lighting should look based on the lights I have set up in the scene and the way that the geometry is positioned relative to those lights, and it makes these light maps, which are like superimposed over all the surfaces of the scene. And this is why, like, if I move some geometry around, there still might be a shadow from whatever I moved, because we haven't rebuilt the lights, which I think I talked about in another video. So like you can see here, like this is casting shadows down here. All these getting some cool shadows from these tanks, But like, check it out, if I move them, I can just actually turn them off. Their shadows are still there. Well, you might say, well, look, there's ones in the back. That's probably what's doing it. Let's turn those off too. So you can see the shadows are baked into the texture. Now this is as opposed to, I'm just going to hit Control Z a bunch. This is as opposed to a solution called Realtime lighting, which is more expensive and harder on your computer. So you wouldn't want to do it on slower machines or on scenes that are meant to run on the web browser or on mobile. But real-time lighting means that the lighting is being generated and the shadows are being cast at runtime, like while I hit play. So it doesn't do any of that pre-computing, and it just generates it all on the fly. And that's good for things like that need to be dynamic, like when you need to turn lights on and off or move stuff that affects shadows. And so you can use kind of a mixed solution, because even in our baked scene here, if I go back to the lighting tab and go to the scene tab within it, even when I'm using the baked lighting, I still have things that are like dynamic game actors, like my characters that are walking around. And so the way that Unity decides if it needs to bake the lighting information in or generate it dynamically is based on if the particular game object that you select is marked as static or not. So if you want something to get light maps baked in when you choose generate lighting here, and you have baked lighting turn on, you have to make sure that that object is marked static. So what happens a lot is you might notice your scene looks good except some new prop you added is totally dark. Well, double check that it's set to static and then generate your lighting again. I almost always leave this unchecked while I'm, iterating on my layouts, because it's taxing on your computer to generate this lighting, and it makes everything go slower, and I'm making a lot of changes. So again, that's part of why you don't mess with lighting until the polish stage of things. So once you've built your lights, if you notice something doesn't seem like it's being lit correctly, you might want to double check if static is correctly marked on it. Now for characters, I wouldn't want my characters to be marked static. So they are meant to be not static. And so you can see if I run my game, the shadows that they're casting are like, you see how it's moving along with her? That's how I know it's a real-time shadow. It's based on her actual live pose. Same with my player. As my player runs around, you can kind of see her shadow there moving too. So that's our clue that I guess it's working right. Now there are ways to use shadows with all baked lighting with something called light probes, but it's totally a heavyweight setup that is too much to go into in this video. Another common thing that's going to be helpful for you is like, I didn't make this scene, so I don't know where the lights are. You could just search lights in the inspector and hope that they named it. Like if they named things well, you would assume the lights would have light in their name, but there is this nifty new tool called Light Explorer. Actually, I don't know how new it is. But it lists all the lights in the scene. It's super useful if you have a complicated scene. You can hold shift and select lots of them and uncheck them all. It's really nice, I think, for like if you have a performance issue because there's too many real-time lights. It makes your game go slow. You could try turning some of them off and see what the difference is in terms of frame rate and also in terms of how the scene looks. So you could just uncheck them to turn them off. So this is my directional light. It's the only light in the scene. Makes things really easy. You can see it's set to mixed, which means it's going to bake lights on the static stuff, and it's going to put a real-time light on the dynamic, on the things that aren't checked as static. I could change the color of the light. So first of all, if I select, I don't know if there's a way to actually select this directly in here. So I guess what I would do is just search for it now that I know what it's called. And then if I click it, you can see like all the full info about this light component on the directional light game object. And it looks like I have like a quick access to many of them here, but there are some maybe special settings you might want to check out. I don't know. But directional light is a really common one, especially for an outdoor scene. It's essentially like the sun. And if you double click it, and if I go back to the scene window, I'm going to clear out my search so you can just see it. It's this guy way back here. And it doesn't matter where it's positioned. It's going to light up the whole scene just like the sun would. But it does matter how it's angled or rotated. So I guess I should go look at one of my characters. If you look at my shadows down here, while I rotate this directional light, you'll see they change. It's kind of like a time of day type change here. But you'll notice some of the environment isn't really changing so much, and that's because they are marked as static. And so I'd have to rebuild the lights to get that change. Now I see this like big building is casting a real-time shadow, so that's a clue that I forgot to mark it static. So change children would change the, like, I think I have an interior to this. I was thinking about maybe using, and so this thing's never going to move, so it should be marked static. So by rotating my, by rotating the directional light, I was able to uncover that I had an error in my lighting where something was creating a real-time light that didn't need to. And it looks like maybe this one, if I could click it. Oh no, I swear I was seeing a few other shadows change, which again are clues that I don't have dynamic checked correctly, or static checked correctly. Thing is, once I make any changes by marking things static, I just had to make sure I remember and go into generate lighting. Now there's some other lights you could add, like if there was a scene that either, like, well, first of all, let's say you're doing an interior scene. What you might want to do is not use the Skybox as a light source because you're inside, so you don't need that. So you would probably change it to color. And then you can choose the color that you want, which is kind of generally like affect how the whole scene looks. And more importantly, you can affect the brightness of everything. So the ambient light is going to affect everything kind of uniformly. So it's a good way if your scene is just a little too dark in general, you could just crank up the ambient light. This is obviously too much, but I'm just showing you that it works. And if I had an indoor scene and I had no lights and I had the ambient color all the way to black, you would see nothing. It would be pitch black. So if you're wondering, like, why am I still getting light? I don't get it. I have deleted all of my lights. It's probably because you have this ambient light or the Skybox light happening. I don't really want any of these changes. In fact, what I'm probably going to do is go up to the scene here and I'm just going to hit discard changes because I made so many that I wasn't really paying attention to them. So back to lights you can add. This is something you should just, if you go to the Unity Learn website and search lighting, there's going to be some good, I actually think there's some LinkedIn learning tutorials they've created about lighting now, and some good Unity Learn lighting tutorials also. But if you go to the game object menu and you choose light, and then you see these choices, area light only works for baked lighting. So if you're putting those in and you don't understand why it's not working, it's probably because you don't have your lighting set to baked, or you need to generate the lighting still. Point light is kind of like the most generic. That's just going to like light things up in this radius, which you can change, right? Not seeing much impact on this scene because it's all set for baked lighting. You can change whether any light is going to be real time or mixed or baked, and you can find all your lights in this lighting explorer, which I said is really helpful because sometimes they get lost. Another important thing is just changing the color of your lights, which you might want to like match things in the environment that might be light sources, or just to make something look cool, like either maybe like a glowing screen, or you just want to put a red light on like dead body or something. Who knows what it could be.